Well, greetings everyone. David Arundel here. I'm going to be providing an overview for supplemental instruction, which is known by other names around the world, including PASS, but I'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes then. There's 6 major programs which I pay attention to in terms of national and international models for peer-assisted learning at the tertiary or the post-secondary level. The one that we're taking a look at this time around is supplemental instruction. In comparison with the other 5 in this circle, it's the oldest, it's probably the largest, and has been adopted at the largest number of institutions around the world. A definition for SI is it's an academic enhancement program. It creates a supportive learning environment that really helps students to develop their academic capacity to become powerful and independent learners. So it's not only just simply in order to help them to be able to get passing marks in the class that they're enrolled in, it's also about developing their capacity to be strong and successful in other classes. Just a little bit of history here. It was created back in 1973 at the University of Missouri, Kansas City by Dr. Deanna C. I was a very fortunate person. I had a chance to spend almost 15 years in Kansas City and got to know the SI program a lot and had a chance to write a number of publications. It has expanded to 33 different countries around the world in more than 1,500 institutions, and that's actually a conservative estimate because also SI is disseminated by regional training centers that operate out of the Australasia, Canada, Europe, and South Africa. So actually those numbers would be much, much higher than that. What are the goals of SI? Well, it's very similar to the other peer learning programs I've been talking about. We want to see their academic performance increase. We also want to see increased persistence rates, and that's one of the reasons why institutions oftentimes want to have peer-assisted learning programs like SI, because it continues students who also continue to pay tuition and stay in the residence halls and buy textbooks and all the rest. And also, it's this issue about developing their thinking, learning skills, their ability to be more academically responsible, and for them to think more about their learning process and to make changes to become much stronger students then. Well, what's the major assumption of SI? Well, you can't talk about high-risk students and high-risk courses. Those are inaccurate, and frankly, they're inappropriate terms to use because they help to generate stigma. College is hard. It's challenging. It's a different environment than it was at the secondary level. What we have to focus on is this highlighted area down here at the bottom. Why is it that we need academic support programs? Well, it's the mismatch between the level of instruction, the high academic standards that are expected by the professors, and the level of student preparation. Regardless of where you're at in your skills, SI, like the other peer learning groups, is a positive for helping you to get better, regardless of whether you've had previous success with high grades or you've just barely gotten through some courses. The SI experience is going to help to make you stronger as a student. Well, there's a lot of requirements in order to implement things that look like SI. This particular overview is going to be a little more detailed because I was involved in the training program and helped to train faculty and staff from 400 different colleges how to be able to implement the SI program. So you may want to stop the video or stop the audio and take a look at the PowerPoint slides in order to be able to see more detail. But here I'm just focusing on what does the institution have to do? Well, number one, the top leadership has got to buy into the SI program. This is not a program that's owned only by, let's say, the Learning Center or perhaps by a faculty member who wanted to have it attached to their particular course, this has got to be part of the campus retention system. And they need to be able to put their authority to make sure that there's stable funding, adequate staff, the kinds of resources you need over multiple years in order to be able to grow a program and sustain it, and hopefully, probably, to increase the size of it then. We need to have mid-level leadership buy into the program. Operationally, they're going to be the ones that set aside for the finances for the people to be hired, the students who will be hired as the SI leaders or the facilitators, whichever word that you end up using. And also making sure that the academic departments and the academic units are accountable for making sure that the SI program is true to its design features. There's a particular protocol for SI, just like all the other programs that are in this series. And we've got to make sure that we're following the rules. And why is it? Because we know that programs are more successful whenever they follow the design principles which were created by the originators of the programs then. For the faculty members, they have got to be highly supportive of this program. There's not enough budget to go around to have enough SI associated with all of the historically difficult courses with high rates of Ds, Fs, Ws, and Is for incompletes. Faculty have got to heavily buy into this. They can't just simply allow it to be attached. They need to make periodic announcements. It needs to be included in the syllabus. It needs to be viewed as a positive, supportive program for all of the students who are inside the class. The faculty members need to provide the student grades to the supervisor or the administrator of the campus program so they can do their evaluation studies in order to be able to share with those upper-level people and those mid-level people about what the return on investment has been. How has this been making an improvement for the students with grades then? Also, the faculty member needs to meet with a facilitator on a weekly basis, but that can be done through the faculty members' office hours that they already have posted then. But it's important for them to be a part of the system. We also need for the faculty members to permit the facilitators to be able to communicate with the students in the class, both through making some announcements generally in the class, maybe in the first 30 seconds or the last 30 seconds of the class period, and also through email then as well. And also ensure that the support program, like SI, it starts at the very beginning of the academic term. And that's true for all of the other programs that I've been describing in this series as well. We can't wait until after the first exam, figure out who had bad grades, and then say, well, here's a program for you. If you end up waiting until that point, students are already made a decision probably to drop out. The research from Dr. Tinto says most often the dropout for students is within the first 6 weeks of the academic term, which tends to be about the time of the first major examination that's given. I know that from my own personal experience as a teacher who just retired after 40 years teaching introductory history courses in 2-year and 4-year colleges here in the U.S. Well, you need to end up having somebody who's going to be supervising, managing, coaching, whatever you want to say about that. They've got the responsibility for leadership for this thing, and you can just kind of see some of the kinds of duties that they have: hire, train, evaluate, and supervise these student facilitators. These people need to be qualified for their position. The International Center for SI in the United States and the regional centers that I talked about that are located inside of Canada, South Africa, Sweden, and in Australia, well, they conduct training workshops throughout the year, so the U.S. is not the only place you can receive training, but they've got to be, whoever's hired has got to go through formal training. They need to go through 2 to 3 days of training. They can't just simply read the material. That's the reason why I've said that about the other programs in this series of major peer learning programs. For the most part, all of them have national and international conferences on a frequent basis. We need to go to those places and continue to go to those throughout our time in the role as the supervisor to continue the professional development. It's difficult to run these kinds of programs. There's lots of nuances. The training notebook for a supervisor, whenever I worked in Kansas City and helped to write that one, it went on for about 100 pages. There's a lot of detail, and also the training notebook for the facilitators, well, it goes on for about a good 50 pages or so. So there's a lot of nuances regardless of the program, whether it's ESP or SLA or SI. There's a lot that the supervisor needs to be able to know. This person who's the campus SI supervisor, well, it needs to be the liaison who's keeping contact with these administrators as well as with the faculty members. They have ongoing professional development for the facilitators, and then, as I said, they've got to go to that annual and biannual conferences to keep up their training. We need to have a multi-day training notebook before these new facilitators even start. Then we need to end up having observations of those facilitators to coach them, provide feedback. It's really difficult to serve as an SI leader. I served as an SI leader. Anybody who does training has served as an SI leader in one or more classes in recent years, because how can we go and do the training if we've not actually experienced what those facilitators are experiencing themselves then? And then also you need to have periodic team meetings with the facilitators throughout the academic term. Just simply doing a couple of days of training before the academic term starts is not enough. They only can absorb so much. That's true for anybody. That includes me, humans. There reaches a point to where you give them enough information in order for them to start, and then you have periodic meetings where you supplement more information. Those become the teachable moments. That's whenever the SI leaders now have some experiences, successful, sometimes not successful, and they're open to learning more ideas then. Also, the supervisor has to be the one that makes the final decision on selecting the courses, because it goes back to, if the faculty member is not going to be highly supportive, not be involved in the program, not want to spend time with the facilitator providing feedback, well, you need to just simply politely explain, well, thank you for your interest. I'm talking with other faculty members. I don't have enough budget to reach everyone. I'll let you know. Because if they're not willing to buy into it, well, then that's really not a good use of the college's money. So that goes into terms for the course selection, and that also includes on the supervisor has to make the final decision on which facilitators to select. Faculty members, sometimes we think that obviously the best facilitator would be the one who just had an A+ in the class and is kind of a savant and seems to be able to instantaneously understand this material. Well, God bless those people. You know, I've had those kinds of students in the class. Frankly, I would rather have a student who had to struggle a little bit. I'd almost prefer taking a B+ or an A- student versus an A+ student. Because sometimes the A+ student doesn't understand the struggles that the other students in the class are making. And they might be wonderful in their future vocations, whatever they're going to be, but to be a facilitator to help other students who are emotionally distraught because they've never had academic failures before. They're confused about what skills are needed in order to be successful in this particular class, because after all, they probably were very successful in their high school classes. So that's the reason why it's so important on this decision. The the supervisor's got to pick the course and has to have the final word on the facilitator. The faculty member can recommend students. That's just fine. But the final decision's got to be by the supervisor. Once again, there's ongoing supervision and evaluation of the program. Every single academic term, there needs to be an evaluation to look at the results. It's not enough just to have a pilot period and then to quit producing the reports. Those reports help in order to help improve the overall quality of the program, and also it provides the kind of documentation that you need for those upper-level administrators when they're making tough budget decisions. Why pick funding the SI program but not 2 other programs? So we need to help them in the decision-making process. And also, as the program goes and grows, well, we probably need to have some more people hired part-time then. I just have to move on at this point because of time limitations, but there's an entire body of knowledge within the SI community, and you would end up discovering, if you went through the training, how to be able to grow a program. Well, what kinds of requirements do we have for the facilitator? Well, as I said, they need to have a high grade. As I said, let's not set some sort of artificial limit. They have to be A+. You can end up selecting students who have good communication skills and still get a B and still have a success. Once again, during the training workshop, they go through lots of scenarios on how do you evaluate who would be the best match. I used that same philosophy whenever I was hiring staff, whenever I was at Kansas City as the interim director. It isn't a matter of good and bad, it's who has the best match. And it's a pretty complicated thing when you think about this hiring process. The facilitator attends the class. They actually know what's going on. They're in the class. Other students are going to pay attention to them, and they're going to notice if the facilitator is taking notes or not. The facilitator needs to know what's going on in class, serves as a model for other students inside of the course, and can use part of that time to start drafting up their session plan. So they're going to be thinking about what kinds of activities, how can I organize students whenever I'm inside of the class then. You're prohibited from serving as the student assistant. You're not in the business of grading quizzes, helping with exams, and the rest. That's just something that you can't do because then you've crossed the line and now you've become a grading authority. Part of the reason why students will go to SI and say what they say is that they know that it's a safe place to talk about what's going on inside the class. They know that they can demonstrate their weaknesses to somebody else and not worried that somehow that might have an influence on how they were being graded then. Several hours of office hours each week, and those are places whenever they're working on their flexible session plan. You come up with a plan and then you make adaptations as needed during the session based on the students who end up showing up. It also gives you a place to where you can meet with some students individually, because some will need a little bit of individual help. And also, in order to be a facilitator, most all programs are going to be asking the facilitator to reflect about their experience. And that's the reason why I have a whole series of other videos that talk about research that looks at, well, how do the facilitators change as a result of this experience? And the research shows they change academic majors, change their careers, begin to see themselves as a leader, which is different than simply using leadership skills. They start to see themselves differently, and that's coming through in reflection. As a side note, in the past 10 years, I've had my students in my class do more reflective writing, short things. One paragraph, maybe a longer paragraph, And I think that that's been one of the secrets. There's an abundance of research that says if you really want to help students to learn more, is to get them to write more paragraphs where they reflect about what they've learned. What sense does it make? How can you apply that? And what difference does it make to me? Well, how do the sessions operate? Well, you end up integrating content review and learning skills together. In fact, the way you want to run these sessions is you never say, well, let's take 10 minutes now and I'll give you 10 tips on how to take better lecture notes. Our experience with the SI program was that students don't want to hear that. If they want to hear that, they'll go and take another class on campus that is a learning skills class. That's not denigrating about that. I've taught those courses before, but that's not SI. I end up modeling behaviors of different ways to take lecture notes inside the class, and we end up sharing amongst ourselves how to be able to do that. And I ask other students to share their methods. I'm talking about whenever I served as an SI leader in an American history course for Dr. Lou Potts. Facilitator is modeling behavior, not telling other behavior. There's all kinds of different activities that occur, so there's a real blend, and it all kind of depends on the type of academic content, what kinds of activities that you do. So SI is going to look very different in a math class versus a history course versus a philosophy class. There's a big emphasis on understanding process rather than always identifying the correct answer. We could end up, and number one, also, you never do homework during an SI session, but it's more important to understand the how. How do you do it? Because sometimes it's difficult to always discern the process for solving. And that's the reason why we still do get to answers, but we're a lot more concerned about the process. Now, there are online SI programs where it's being offered. At the time I'm recording this video, we're in the middle of the flu pandemic in the United States. It's March 2020. Colleges across America, including my own, from which I just retired, University of Minnesota Twin Cities, with 3 days' notice, the faculty are informed, do the best you can, go online. Figure it out. And they're putting lots of resources. So I work at an institution that has lots of technical help, and they're doing all kinds of webinars and such on how to be able to use different software packages. We bought some gigantic license for Zoom, which I notice seems to be one that's talked about. But there's other ones that are out there. But we know that online SI sessions have lots of advantages and also challenges to them as well. Well, these SI sessions, they're regularly conducted at the same weekly schedule, and generally we recommend having 3 to 5 sessions per week. Now, whenever I say that, those 3 to 5 sessions may not all be different from each other. The goal is for students to be able to come one time once a week, and you kind of think about that and you go, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense, David. What if I have a class that meets 3 times a week? Are you trying to tell me that coming to only one SI where we talk about the Monday or the Wednesday or the Friday lecture is useful? Well, that's because if we go back up to the top of our list up here, the real secret sauce of SI is not just that it's a review about the content. It's also about helping students to develop their learning strategy mastery and how to be able to use it in the appropriate place at the appropriate time. And that's part of the magic of why you could actually just go to SI once a week or maybe once every other week and still benefit, because it's about this mastery of the learning strategies that we think is going to enable you to become a stronger student, not only in this class, but in other classes as well. Because you can't afford to have SI in every single course throughout the curriculum. That's not a realistic expectation. Now, here's one of the big things. SI is voluntary. Now, there are some programs that do require participation. When I did my dissertation study on SI back in about the year 2000, I found that 5 to 10% of SI programs did require attendance, or they required it for some student populations. For example, athletes were required to go at least 10 weeks out of a 15-week academic semester, or students in other groups. But for the most part, SI is voluntary, and there's an entire section of training that talks about what are 50 different techniques that you can use in order to help attract more students to be able to come to your SI sessions. But let me just simply share that that is a defining element, and most all of the other programs that I talked about in this series, ESP, PLTL, SLA, and the others, well, they're all structured. And I think part of the reason why that they went to a mandatory was that the entire field has been shifting over the past quarter century to more embedded programs and mandatory programs. I'll talk here in just a moment how come a voluntary program is still so popular and widely used in the United States. And here we come. Scales for evaluation. It's been recognized and implemented internationally. Moderate level of success. When I say moderate, students who participate in SI tend to get a final course grade that's somewhere between half and a full letter grade higher. Well, that's pretty successful. You can't guarantee that students who are going to drop out of the class are suddenly all going to start earning A's. That's not realistic. In fact, that's one of the odd things that we found from our research was that sometimes whenever you drop the dropout rate, that's one of the fastest things that happens whenever you have an SI program, is the DFW&I rate drops in half. So students stay inside the class, and sometimes those students are happy to get a passing grade, which if you are in a non-STEM area, well, is probably a C. And for that student, they're going to think that that's a successful event. I didn't have to drop the class and retake it. I received a C. So sometimes the appearance of the grades are not as powerful as looking at, did we get through students through the course? And that's the DFW&I rate. So that's the reason why I use the word moderate there. For goodness sakes, I've spent most of my career writing and doing research about supplemental instruction. I know more about it, and I deeply have a great deal of affection for the program because it's from whence I came. You don't really need any institution-wide policies because this is something that operates at the course level. And in fact, this operates at the section level. So you could have the same, let's say, general chemistry course being taught by 3 different professors. Well, it may be that you only need to have SI attached to one professor and not the other 2. Now, you would think that would cause some sort of problems. Well, it actually doesn't. You just simply explain, I have enough money in order to be able to cover Professor X, and that professor is probably quite delighted to have academic support for his or her students. So, as I said, it all depends really on somehow that mismatch between academic preparation and academic expectations by the instructor. No judgments are made. No judgments are made among those 3 different chemistry instructors. It's just that they operate differently. It's not our business to get into their business. Our business is to provide academic support to help more students to be able to successfully pass and do well in classes further on in the sequence then. We need to have limited faculty time. It doesn't take very much time for them. Preferably, we'd like to have high support. I put mild interest. I think I need to change that slide. I think that one was the way I used to look at this 10 years ago. I think that a better one would be is highly supportive, because chances are you're not going to have enough money to have SI in every single class that has high rates of D, F, W, and I. I mean, I've seen the statistics, and whenever I worked at my previous institution, there were some classes that had rates of those unsuccessful grades of 50 to 70%. 50 to 70%. So it's important for us to select the classes that both have high academic need because of those high rates of academic failure, as well as a faculty member who is highly supportive of the program. It only really requires an undergraduate to serve as the facilitator. They could be a second semester, first-year student for students enrolled in a class taken by first-year students first semester. So it doesn't require the same level of sophistication that some of the facilitators that I've talked about in the other programs. You need to have a salary for the undergraduate students. I don't want to really come up with a number because that's going to become dated over time with people listening to this. Let me just simply say it probably takes about 10 hours a week for a SI leader to be able to go to class, do some office hours, do their preparation, and then do their, let's say, 3 sessions per week. Probably a salary that's close to or slightly higher than what tutors make out of your learning center. So kind of use that as a guide. 10 hours a week times whatever the tutor salaries are paid. Well, what's the bottom line? It's highly effective with large numbers of students in multiple historically difficult courses with voluntary participation, attracting about 1/3 of the students. That's the reason why SI is oftentimes offered in large classes, first semester, first academic term kinds of courses. It's also used in second year, third year. It's actually been used in graduate courses. But from an economy of scale, offering this in a class of 200 means that they're going to be serving somewhere around about 70 students or so are going to choose to participate. Well, from a cost point of view, SI is able to serve lots of students, and that helps to explain part of the reason why that the program is so cost effective. Now, let's kind of get into a little bit more math here. If you're only coming to the SI sessions, let's say every other week, which is a pretty common pattern, and you're offering SI 3 times a week, that means over the course of 2 weeks, sorry about all the math here, well, that means that you've had 6 sessions. Now, if about 1/3 of the students out of that large class decide that they want to come and participate in SI, that means that your SI sessions, just simply by the way that people sort themselves out, it's going to be somewhere between 8 and 12 people are going to show up inside of a session because they're only coming one time about every other week. So that's the reason why that the SI programs can handle the load of being in the larger classes. That would not be possible with some of the other programs which we've taken a look at in this video series. Now, SI is known by other names. The original name was actually called Supplemental Course Instruction. Then they decided that didn't make sense, so that's part of the reason why they got rid of the instruction. So it was called Supplemental, took out the wrong word, take out the word course, and became Supplemental Instruction. You see some of the other ones: Academic Mentoring, Peer Mentoring and Praxis, Academic Peer Mentoring Scheme, Peer Mentoring, and just let me say, there's lots of other programs that have nothing to do with SI also use these names as well. So I'm not trying to say that those other programs operating at other schools automatically are all SI programs. I'm just trying to share with you there's a variety of names that are used If you're outside the United States, and particularly if you're in Australia, South Africa, the United Kingdoms, and other places, oftentimes it's called PASS, and PASS could stand for Peer-Assisted Study Sessions, or Peer-Assisted Study Schemes, both of them for PASS, or they're called PAL, Peer-Assisted Learning. And once again, there's lots of things that are called PAL that are not SI. And one example is the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities. I helped to develop, along with a team of others, our version of SI, which was a hybrid. It was a program that brought in best practices from ESP, PL, TL, plus SI, and we needed to come up with a name, and we just simply chose the word PAL then. So it's used in other names around the United States. What kinds of articles are out there? Well, there's about 1,000 descriptive and research publications about SI. It's the lion's share of the publications that have been made about peer-assisted learning. And a place for you, let me just go ahead and do a couple of places. Here's a couple of books which you could pick up online from Amazon, and used to help reduce the price down. Also, make sure to check out the website info.umkc.edu/SI. And that'll take you to the website then with lots of helpful information, and also the information on how to be able to attend one of the training workshops. I maintain a bibliography of every word that's been written about any of these programs that are on the paragraph here. Emerging Scholars Program, Peer-Assisted Learning, all the articles about what we've done on our campus, which has been replicated in a small number of other institutions, PLTL, Structured Learning Assistance, Supplemental Instruction / PASS, and Video-Based Supplemental Instruction. There is 1,550 plus publications there. So not only, and they're annotated, so you actually can see the summary of the articles. Also, about a third of them all have web links, so you can actually read the articles online or download them if that is your preference. There is also topical sub-bibliographies. For example, one that's really of high interest at this moment in history are the ones that talk about providing the academic service online. And that is not only SI, but also I know that there are some examples within peer-led team learning that also inside of that. So it'll help give you some insight if you want to go to check out that topical bibliography. Well, that would all be found at this place here, z.umn.edu/peerbib. And I continue to add to that, and it's updated on an annual basis then. And then our final slide. I know this is a longer video. There was just simply more content because I knew more about the SI program than I did all the other programs that are out there. We've already been talking about the PeerBib page, but we also have a general page that has training resources and manuals that have been constructed not only by staff and faculty, but also by the student leaders themselves, and that's available at z.umn.edu, peer learning, all one word, peer learning. And then also, if you're interested in what I've written about all kinds of peer learning programs, well, that's available at that same address /pub, pubs peer, PUBSPEER. And then finally, a YouTube channel where all of these videos, plus more, in fact, some of the more interesting ones are my interviews with peer leaders, student leaders. Those particular videos are only about 4 to 6 minutes long or so. Well, you can find that at Peer Learning YouTube. and you might find that to be of particular interest. Be more than delighted to visit with you, and there's my contact information on that final slide at the bottom. Well, I know there was a lot of content. I probably could have made this shorter, but I decided this particular course, as I said earlier, they do a 2 or 3 day training workshop on how to really be able to manage an SI program if you go to one of the centers for SI. That's where the secret is for all of the detail. And the same thing is true for all of those other peer learning programs. If I wanted to do structured learning assistance, I'd go to the website as I illustrated in that other video, and then I would contact the people who run SLA and see when's their next training workshop. I'd go to the International PLTL conference, which is held once a year, and they have lots of training workshops on how to be able to implement and also to improve your program. Those are all resources that take a lot of time to unpack. It's a really difficult job to run these peer learning programs, but also they're delightful. I had so much fun working with the young people who were working as the leaders of these programs. You know, it's one of the things people ask is, do you miss retirement? Well, I'm not retired. I get a chance to do things like this. But at some point, you have to pass the baton to somebody else, and now they're getting to have that wonderful experience. Well, thanks for listening today. Hope my words were useful in your work in helping students to achieve their dreams. Best wishes, everyone.